This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Films and Fermentation, episode 158. If you listened to our previous episode, 157, which was the musical moments and non-musical films, our bracket episode, that has quickly become one of our top 5 most downloaded episodes. So thank you, everybody out there, for downloading it. Tonight, we're doing something a little different. We're going to be having a discussion / argument / debate over what makes a movie a franchise. Once again, this is Films and Fermentation, a movie and alcohol podcast. I'm Leo.
I'm Kevin.
I'm Mike.
We're 3 friends who like to talk shit about movies while getting shit faced. In this episode, we're diving into the cinematic conundrum of what makes a movie part of a franchise. Is it the endless sequels, the recurring characters, or just Hollywood's love for milking a cash cow? Join us for part 1 of our Master Debater series as we argue whether 27 Fast and Furious movies are necessary or just Vin Diesel's retirement plan. So get ready for a discussion as entertaining as a movie marathon. Don't forget to drop us an email at filmsfermentation@gmail.com or visit linktree.com/filmsandfermentation to find all of our social media and podcast links. Become part of the Films and Fermentation family by supporting us on Patreon or buying our merchandise at teespring.com. We are part of the Deluxe Edition Network, The Den, at the deluxeeditionnetwork.com. Please check our show notes and our website for the link to the Denny Awards voting. You can start voting now. The awards will be given out in September. We are up for Podcast of the Year, Male Voice of the Year for all 3 of us, and myself for Podcaster of the Year. And if you go to the Deluxe Edition Network at deluxeeditionnetwork.com, you can check out the podcast of the month for the month of July, the Real Drunks podcast.
Hey guys, Matt coming at you from the Real Drunks. Hey, if you're into movies, booze, craft beers, and just shooting the shit with your friends, join myself, Jake, and Alyssa on the Real Drunks on the Deluxe Edition Network and anywhere you get your podcast from. That's the Real Drunks, REEL, the Real Drunks. Check us out.
That's the Real Drunks podcast at the Den. I want to give a shout out to our new podcast friend, the No Subs, No Dubs podcast. They, actually one guy, it's Casey. He calls himself Casey the Kamikaze Kid, who hosts this podcast. And he reached out to me on Reddit and said that he's been enjoying our show and wanted to give us a shout out on his podcast, but he wanted to ask my permission first. And I said, dude, you don't need my permission. We are always happy to get free publicity. Go for it. And I will be willing to, reciprocate that. So I'm shouting out his podcast as well. No Subs, No Dubs. It's an interesting concept for a podcast. It's he watches foreign films, international films, but the catch is he watches them without subtitles or dubs and tries to suss out what's happening in a film just based on the actions and like the scenery and cinematography and stuff like that. Like, can he understand the film without the translations?
Hell, some of those foreign films you can't even understand with the translations.
Certain ones, I think, like you could probably figure out what's like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. You don't speak Japanese, but I think you figure out what's happening. But then, like,
but you don't know why it's happening.
You don't know why it's happening. But then if I were to like watch a film and say like Arabic, I would have zero clue what the hell's happening in that film. I have the benefit of being able to watch Italian and Spanish films and
I think
somewhat
watching
understand them without the subtitles.
a Bollywood film would be easy to
Well,
kind of.
because it's all dancing.
Yeah.
Or like that one you sent me the one time was like Batman or something. It was like, or the one you sent me recently that was the
The werewolf?
transformation.
Best special effects.
Yeah. So once again, that's the No Subs, No Dubs podcast, and Real Drunks is the podcast of the month for the Deluxe Edition Network. What are we drinking this evening, gentlemen? Who wants to go first? I'll go first since nobody's volunteering.
I mean, everybody's jumping at it.
Yeah, we're all jumping at this. So I decided, since we're doing a theme tonight, and I decided to go with the theme tonight, which is franchises. And in honor of one of the longest running franchises of all time, I am drinking a vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. I haven't had it yet, so we're going to see how well I made it. I have a martini glass here. Let me pour it out and see how it came out.
Any vermouth?
Yep. So it's I looked up the recipe online. It's the Vesper Martini, which is from the James Bond films, and it is vodka, gin, and vermouth with a lemon twist.
Mm-hmm.
Shaken, not stirred.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
That came out well. That came out pretty good.
I'll go next, I guess. I have two up here. This one I had received a few weeks ago when my wife and I went to a magic show. The Mind Noodler. I participated in one of his tricks, and one of the awards I got, or rewards, I guess, is a Pabst Blue Ribbon 16. But it is, you can see it says here, don't worry, this isn't actually Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. 16 fluid OUBCES. So already you know it's not that. So would you guys like me to peel off what it is so that we can all see what the actual beverage is underneath? Because I am unaware as to what it could be. It is, I don't know, is this an actual alcohol? Have you ever heard of Liquid Death?
Yeah. But it's an energy drink, I think.
Yes, I think it's an energy drink.
It's an energy drink?
I think it might be an energy drink.
I believe it's an energy drink.
Oh, God.
Maybe that's, well, you said you were hypnotized?
No, it wasn't hypnosis. I just helped him with, he was doing the get out of chains while behind the curtain kind of thing, and I was holding up the curtain for him.
He wore the skimpy dress and did the,
Yeah. This says, once cracked open, no thirst is safe from liquid death. After ritually dismembering its thirst victims, this brutal can of water used the several body parts of dead thirst to build itself a flesh suit, which is used as a disguise to get a job in marketing. But liquid death never took the job. It just murdered a bunch more thirst instead. Okay.
It's canned water.
It's some kind of water.
So I'm looking. I'm on their website. They have a blueberry buzzsaw iced tea, sparkling mountain water, death dust, which is lime, mango chainsaw, and the one that you have there, it's a white can, right, with a gold label.
Yeah.
That is still mountain water.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, that mountain water is good to make moonshine with, you know.
Yeah.
Is it?
Well,
it doesn't have any alcohol.
I was gonna say, if it wasn't for the fact that you didn't know, this would be a violation.
Well, look, you know me. I always carry a backup. So
unless you're on call, then you have an excuse.
I have my Sam Adams summer ale that I guess I will be going through, but I have some fake Pabst Blue Ribbon beer wrappers. So
it's water in a
thanks a lot, magician man.
Canned water.
Canned water.
That's funny. Michael, what are you drinking?
Well, I do not have canned water. I went to an Old Faithful because I couldn't decide. So I went with Devil's Backbone Distilling Company's Bourbon Orange Smash.
Nice.
Love the Bourbon Orange Smash.
I love the bourbon orange smash too. And okay, Mike, anything happened this week?
This week in film history.
I guess I'll take the first one since I'm the one to put it on there. It has been one of those weeks in the entertainment world. Actually, it's been close to 2 weeks at this point since we started putting these notes together. But within the last, I would say, 10 days or so, we lost Richard Simmons, who died at 76 years old of natural causes. Dr. Ruth Westheimer, 96 years old. It says cause unknown, but I'm pretty sure it's because she was 96 years old.
I thought she was 96 when she was giving out advice back in the 80s.
Yeah, right. Shannon Doherty at 53 died of breast cancer. All three of those deaths happened within 48 hours of each other. And then a few days later, within actually the last couple days, Emmy-winning comedian and actor Bob Newhart also passed away at 96 years old. And it was undisclosed how he passed away, but I'm also assuming because he's 96 years old.
6 years old, yeah.
Wasn't there another death? The guy who played Colonel Mustard in
Martin Mull.
Martin Mull.
Yeah,
Did
Martin
we cover him?
Mull.
Was that a while back?
I think we may have covered
Oh
him
no.
either.
Well, yeah, June 27th. Yeah. it
Yeah,
was a
he
while
might have
back.
been maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago. I think we mentioned him.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's been a lot this summer in general.
Yeah. So
Bob Newhart. Little fun fact about his Emmy. He has one Emmy. He didn't win it as a comedian. He didn't win it for the Bob Newhart Show. He didn't win it for the Newhart Show. His only Emmy came for a guest appearance as Professor Proton on The Big Bang Theory. in a 60-year career. He was 85 years old or something, I think, when he won the Emmy.
With him and his brother Larry and his other brother Larry.
No, it's this is my brother. I'm
This is my
Larry. This is my brother Daryl. This is my other
This is
brother
my other
Daryl.
Daryl.
What's the next one you got there, Mike?
In 1959, North by Northwest, directed by Alfred Hitchcock and starring Cary Grant and Ava Marie Saint, premieres in Los Angeles.
Yes, great Alfred Hitchcock film. One of his best.
Yeah, memorable scene of being chased down by a biplane.
Yeah, great send up of that on Family Guy.
Mm-hmm.
Peter's being chased by a plane, being flown by the giant chicken. My wife just sent me a message letting me know that Duke Fakir of the Four Tops passed away today at age 88. He was the last surviving member of the Four Tops. Motown legends. So just keep adding them on.
Yep.
What's your next one there, Mike?
1988, Die Hard, directed by John McTiernan and starring Bruce Willis and Alan Rickman, is released in the U.S.
I would love one day when we do a director series again to do the movies of John McTiernan, because he did Predator, Die Hard 2, Last Action Hero. It's all these amazing action films of the 80s and 90s that he was behind. What's your next one there, Mike?
2005, Wedding Crasher, starring Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn, premieres.
Ma, get the meatloaf.
Introduce the world to Isla Fisher, the psycho redhead.
Where she basically rapes Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
No, I like to see where he wakes up and the gay brother's in bed with him, and he brings him the painting that he made. You were with her mom last night? Did you motorboat her? Did she let you motorboat her? You motorboating bastard. What's your next one there, Mike?
2009, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the sixth film based on the books by J.K. Rowling, is released worldwide.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, Dumbledore does.
No. And Snape is the Half-Blood Prince.
Yes. What's your next one there, Mike? Got a lot this week.
Yeah, there's a lot. 2011, Captain America: The First Avenger, directed by Joe Johnston, starring Chris Evans and Haley Atwell, premiered in Los Angeles, California.
You can say that about Natalie Dormer, who makes a cameo appearance in the film as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very true.
What's your take on the first Avenger?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Would you put it in like your top 10 of MCU films?
I don't know if I put it in my
10?
top 10, but I see it as a necessity
Mm-hmm.
for the MCU.
I think it's an enjoyable film.
Yeah, I think it's a necessary film.
I did not like Captain America before seeing the movie. I hadn't read any of the comics.
Mhm.
And the incantations of Steve Rogers and Captain America I saw on TV were laughable. So
You're not a fan of that one from the 80s, the rubber
with the
mask,
motorcycle and that
the
huge
motorcycle, and he
effing helmet.
takes on the Italian mob for some reason. No, I think it's one of the better MCU.
But it
films.
did get me. It did branch me out into Captain America, and I like how they treated it. You know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think Chris Evans was a good choice for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I enjoyed it. I think it's one of the better.
Better
and like
than
Mike,
Johnny Storm.
Yeah, and like Mike said, I think it's kind of like a necessary part. It's one of the things that the MCU did right that DCEU didn't do right, which was, tell each of the character stories and then bring them together.
Yep.
Next one there, Mike.
For Kevin, in 2012, The Dark Knight Rises, directed by Christopher Nolan, starring Christian Bale and Anne Hathaway, premieres in New York. Anne Hathaway and those leather
somebody
on
had
the
just
motorcycle on that. Oh,
One of Mike's favorite scenes in film history is Anne Hathaway getting on a motorcycle.
Getting on that motorcycle.
In the leather pants. Oh, hell yeah.
Somebody posted just side by sides of all the cinematic Catwomen. And with the exception of Halle Berry, who is a very attractive woman, but the whole, Catwoman movie was just a terrible film. They've all been knockout, like the characters. They've all portrayed the characters really, really well. Michelle
the original
Pfeiffer.
one is Julie Newmar from the Adam West series, who was drop dead knockout gorgeous.
Yep.
You had Eartha Kitt, who had a pretty interesting take on it. The original Batman film was Lee Merriweather, who looked a lot like Julie Newmar. And then you had Michelle Pfeiffer, who probably my favorite.
Who had to be sewn into her cat costume.
Yes, exactly. And then you had Halle Berry.
Yes.
And then that was followed with Anne Hathaway.
Anne Hathaway.
You have the actress who played her on the Gotham TV series, but she was, playing her as like a teenager.
Right.
And then the most recent one was Zoe Kravitz.
Zoe Kravitz.
Who's also a beautiful woman. And I liked her too. So I think almost all the portrayals have been pretty good, I thought.
Yeah.
Minus the Halle Berry, but I don't think that's Halle Berry's fault.
No, that's not on her. She won the Razzie for it, but I think that was not on her. She accepted it knowing that the movie was shit. So
I enjoy an actor who's willing to accept the Razzie. What's that, Mike?
She's better Storm anyway.
Yeah. True.
Although I do enjoy
an opportunity to branch out in her superhero films.
I do like an actor who's willing to go to the Razzies and accept their award.
Oh yeah.
So, Sandra Bullock is the only actress to win an Oscar and a Razzie in the same weekend.
Oh really?
And she appeared at both to accept both awards.
It was for the same role.
No, she won the Oscar. She won the Oscar for The Blind Side.
And
the Razzie, I don't remember the name of the film, but it was like a really dumb romantic comedy with Bradley Cooper. I can't remember the name of the film. It was like something about Steve or some shit like that. I don't know. What do you got next, Mike?
2015, Marvel's Ant-Man, starring Paul Rudd, is as the titular character is released.
Titular.
He's the testicular kid.
The testicle tickler character.
He's
when he's microscopic, he can definitely tickle your testicles.
Oh, absolutely.
You can tickle
more. He can be like that guy. He can be like that guy in The Boys, Kev.
You know what? If we had a guy like Ant-Man or the guy in the boys, prostate exams would be much easier.
That's
I don't
true.
know because Kevin and I both watched The Boys, and if you watch
Yeah,
the
but you
episode we're
don't
talking
grow
about,
when you're in there.
well, the guy goes inside his boyfriend's junk and then sneezes and gets real big all of a sudden and blows the guy up. So, it's like, so there are dangers. Although
That was the
I
whole
do,
Thanos theory, wasn't it?
yeah, I do
Why
enjoy the
Ant-Man-
Thanos theory that he should have went up Thanos' ass as microscopic and then blew himself up. All right, so the last one is mine. I just added this because I just saw this yesterday. So Amazon Prime is currently putting together a Spider-Man series. It's going to be a limited live-action series based on the Noir character, which first appeared in the Across the Spider-Verse animated film, was voiced by Nicolas Cage. This live-action limited series will star Nicolas Cage.
No.
It's only going to be 8 episodes long. It's going to feature some various monsters, and Sandman is going to be the villain. Brendan Gleeson, best known as Professor Moody, is going to be playing one of the villains in the show.
They
It
bring
tells
back
the.
Thomas Hayden Church.
I think it's the actor playing Sandman's name is Lamorne Morris. I'm not sure who he is.
Oh.
It tells the story of an aging and down on his luck private investigator in 30s New York who is forced to grapple with his past life as the city's one and only superhero. And this is why I wanted to bring this to you. It's the quote from Nicolas Cage about the series. It's it's more of a pop art mashup, like a Liechtenstein painting with some sparkle to it. It's not really people beating people up. Monsters are involved.
So did he go to the Dakota Johnson School of Press Junkets for
No, if
Spider-Man?
Dakota Johnson were describing the film, she would have been like, "They paid me $9 million." It's a pop art mashup, like a Liechtenstein painting with some sparkle to it. And there's monsters.
And there's monsters.
That was my favorite part of the quote. It's like he has this whole big, pretentious description of it, and then at the last part, it's monsters are involved. I'm gonna watch it because I have a morbid
I'm
curiosity
shocked.
about this Spider Noir series starring Nicolas Cage.
You should watch it after Madam Web.
You should watch it after watching his performance in the recent horror release Long Legs.
Long Legs.
Speaking of live action reboots or going from animation to live action, I read somewhere that Kevin Feige believes that a live action version of Clone Wars will save Star Wars.
But do you need a live action version of it since you already have the animated one?
The animated one was okay.
People hasn't watched the animated one, so maybe they'll watch the live action.
What's going to save Star Wars is if they stop giving important franchises to people who don't follow the lore or the canon or understand the story. So
pretty much Mandalorian and Ahsoka are what's going to freaking save it.
Yeah, Mandalorian, Ahsoka. I like Andor.
Obi-Wan.
I know you had a hard time getting through it.
I liked Andor.
I liked Obi-Wan a lot.
Oh, Obi-Wan.
I was not a fan of this Acolyte series.
I didn't hate it, but there
were moments I liked. I thought the fighting was pretty good. Some of the action sequences were really well done.
Yeah.
I thought the villain, the guy, the whatever
stranger.
he was, the stranger was pretty good. I like the guy from Squid Game as Soul. Like I thought he was pretty good. But otherwise I was like, I was sold on it, thinking that Carry-On Moss was the star.
No, they should have had more money and it should have had more time.
Yeah,
they had $200 million.
Yeah,
and then they should have tried to be, Game of Thrones and kill everybody off at the beginning.
I mean, I know Disney is struggling and hurting for cash, but
not even Game of Thrones does that, man. Game of Thrones at least gives you like a few episodes to get to know the character before they kill him.
What did I
Well,
read
that's what they
somewhere
did with
that
that's what they did with all the other Jedi's.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones' entire budget um, would only cover about 2 episodes of The Acolyte.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not understanding that.
Yeah,
You know?
I don't see it because if you look at the production, it looks like sound stages.
Yep.
I mean, there is some CGI, but it's not extensive.
Mm-mm.
You know, the lightsabers are pretty cool. Like they look good. I guess most of the budget went to
Fighting sequences.
Master Venerstra's light whip that you only see once.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
That's all I gotta say about that.
Yeah.
Mike, you have any must-try beer craft destination for this evening?
I do. Let's see. I have a must-try beer. Rocky Mountain Sherpa Porter from Front Range Brewing Company.
Bless
Exactly. Nearly black, but with rosy hints. Sherpa pours with a fine white lace and caramel latte aromatics. There's a nice malty note to the aroma with a subtle stone fruit background, plums, and a slight hint of cherry. A very subtle hint of coffee to an exceptional smooth palate, much more like a black lager than an American style robust porter. With 7% alcohol by volume, there is a bit of warmth in the aftertaste, but overall it's a very smooth, almost lager like black ale. There you go, sweet guys. Rocky Mountain Sherpa Porter.
Hmm.
My martini is really good, but I think I made it a little strong.
What else is new?
My gin and tonics last night were enough to give me a headache this morning. So
I went a little heavy on the gin and a little not so heavy on the vodka and vermouth.
Ooh.
So. Kev, you have some beer news is good news for us?
Of course.
Beer is good. Beer is good. Beer is good. It's soft. Beer is good. Beer is good. Beer is good. Let's go drink some beer.
Thank you. I wish I could say I was going to branch out, go national, go international, but the only two interesting stories I found for the beer news this week are local, but they're more local to Mike than they are to me and Leo. Pennsylvania has had a long history of putting limits on buying booze, but it just loosened one of its laws. Here are some of the restrictions. Before House Bill 829 was signed into law last week, Pennsylvania rules for buying alcohol were as follows. You could buy beer at a grocery store, but you couldn't buy a case of beer there. And to do that, you would have to go to a beer distributor, where you could also buy alcoholic seltzers, but not all alcoholic seltzers. To buy high noons or statesides, you had to go to a state store where you can't buy beer. While it might seem like you needed a law degree to understand how to buy booze in Pennsylvania, all of the state's rules about purchasing alcohol were simplified with a signature last Monday from Governor Josh Shapiro. Well, not exactly, but at least now you can get an 8-pack of Surfside at your grocery store. Thanks to the new law, businesses can sell ready-to-drink cocktails, which the legislation defines as any premixed drink of 16 ounces or less made with distilled liquor that has an ABV of no more than 12.5%. That's fine by me. Previously, spirits-based seltzers like High Noon and Stateside were prohibited from being sold in grocery and convenience stores, but similar drinks that were made from fermented sugar and malted barley like White Claw and Truly were allowed. While the law fixes one of the confusing alcohol purchasing restrictions in the state, there are plenty that still remain, including the limit of 192 fluid ounces of beer, the equivalent to 12 16-ounce cans, per transaction at grocery and convenience stores. There were 5 laws that they went into. Let me just briefly go into them. Some of the crazier liquor laws in Pennsylvania, starting with 1933's Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, which was established by Governor Gifford Pinchot. It was a way of putting the bootleggers out of business. It was a moneymaker for the state, though. So many of the issues stem from this liquor control board establishment in 1933. In 1971, with the 21st Amendment lowering the voting age from 21 to 18, many states changed their drinking ages to 18, 19, or 20. By 1975, every state on the East Coast had lowered the legal age for purchasing beer and wine, except for Pennsylvania. They didn't change. It wasn't until 1984 when the national minimum age of 21 was set for purchasing alcohol. This one, Pennsylvania's first experimented with Sunday hours at state stores, opening about 10% of its 638 state-run locations. Beer distributors could start selling 12-packs and 6-packs and single bottles and growlers instead of a case or kegs. And then in 2020, the whole thing about purchasing your alcohol over state lines. If you were to go to tax-free Delaware, it's illegal if you got caught bringing your alcohol back over. Same with New Jersey. In 2020, Delaware police officers were turning away Pennsylvania residents who were traveling to Total Wine and Spirit off of Interstate I-95 in Claymont.
I do it all the time.
I'm not going to say we've all done it, but we've all done it.
We've done it. Come on.
You know,
Because there's alcohol there you can't get up here.
That was more because of strict COVID-19 rules than anything else, though. So,
Now, when I first moved up here, I was shocked that I couldn't go anywhere and buy a fucking 6-pack. I had to buy a case. I couldn't buy a 6-pack. I had to buy a goddamn case. From North Carolina, where you can go to a goddamn gas station and buy a 6-pack. They're coming up here and you can't get anything except from a beer distributor. I'm glad
we
we
live in Jersey. We don't worry about that shit.
no, it's
Yeah, but
the breweries had a whole shit ton of weird rules that went into effect with food.
When I moved up here, you both lived in Pennsylvania.
That is true.
I drank a lot more liquor.
Second story is just to address Yuengling addresses the rumor mill of being sold and distributed in Illinois. Essentially, there was some rumors going out that from Beer Advocate and the radio stations in the Illinois area that said Yuengling would start distributing and selling in Illinois, and Yuengling has denied this. So essentially, the news is that there's no news to present to Illinois. Currently, Yuengling is only available in 26 states. They are Alabama, Arkansas, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Missouri, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and West Virginia. But it is the oldest brewery in the United States, established in 1829.
In Pottstown.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh. Sorry
to bore you. Oh, and my anecdotal news story.
What's your anecdotal news story?
Gentlemen, I don't know if you are the cooks in your household, but I am the one in mine.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And we decided we would try beer can chicken tonight.
Mm.
It's okay, but it's a hell of a lot more effort than than it needs to be, or than
Yeah,
than
Stuffing that can up that bird's ass is
I
tough.
was gonna say, that's where you shove the can up its ass, right?
It is. It's where you take your can of beer, and they
Mhm.
recommend a lager. The recipe I followed suggested taking about a quarter of the can, putting it into the bottom of the pan, or the bottom of the roast pan. Stick the rest of the can right up the chicken's butt, and have it sit up in the pan while you bake it, okay, or roast it. Well, I'll tell you, my first situation was the chicken was bigger than the can, so it went way throughout the cavity than it should have.
It was
So
coming out the neck.
in other words, you needed a crowler for that one.
I needed something like this.
Except if you were to cook it with liquid death, you're basically shoving water up its ass. You're giving your bird an emina.
But something this tall would probably have been sufficient in terms of, like, the can size and
So what
keeping the
you're
bird.
saying,
It was only a
you
pound
were
and a half bird.
inadequate for your bird.
Right. It was only a pound and a half bird. Did it make it more moist? Maybe a little bit more. Dark meat's always going to be a little more moist than the white meat. But what I will tell you I forgot was that I had this can of beer up the chicken's butt. So when I wanted
And you drank it? Oh,
no,
freak.
no. When I wanted to start to carve the chicken, I put the chicken on its side, and that's when my wife exclaimed, "There's liquid coming out! There's liquid coming out of the chicken!" And I got all over the counters and the floor, and I had to mop that up, and then find a way of removing this can out of the chicken's ass to begin to cook it. So, was the chicken bad? The chicken was not bad. Was it worth all the hassle that went into it? No, absolutely not. I will find other ways of roasting the chicken that do not involve, surgically putting. And I lost a whole can of beer. It was a full cap.
You should let Molly lick it up off the ground.
Oh yeah, that would have been great.
There you go, folks. Just a warning for you out there. If you're looking to cook some beer can chicken, make sure your can is not too small for your bird's ass.
No, it's got to be larger than a 12-ounce can.
And if you really know how to cook some beer chicken, let us know. Maybe
if you have a recipe, or if there's something I did wrong that you can suggest I correct, I'm willing to give it another go.
We're willing to do a live remote broadcast from your house if you want to invite us over to the next barbecue.
Absolutely.
Free of charge. We just need beer and beer can chicken.
That's right.
And the pool.
And the pool. All right. We're going to take a quick break to hear a little message from Coffee Brothers, and then we'll be back with our main segment, our discussion tonight about what constitutes a movie franchise. We'll be right back.
I love a good beer, but right now, I could use a good cup of coffee.
Have you heard about Coffee Brothers?
Oh, yeah. They're that coffee company out of New York, right?
Well, they're more like a coffee wizards of New York City. They source these amazing seasonal blends and single origin coffees. It's like a flavor adventure in every cup. And get this, they roast everything in small batches. None of that mass-produced stuff. It's like each bean gets the VIB treatment.
VIB?
Very important bean.
Sounds fancy, but is it worth it?
Definitely. Plus, they're a two-person team. I mean, that's dedication right there. Two brothers, one mission to caffeinate the world. And right now, you can save 10% on your order. I mean, who doesn't love a good discount?
All right, you've convinced me. Let's get some Coffee Brothers now.
Coffee Brothers, where every cup is a sip of perfection. Save 10% on your next order with the code FNF10. That's FNF10. Cheers to great coffee. Hey, everybody. Thank you for sticking with us after that little break from Coffee Brothers. We're getting to our main segment now. But before we do that, Kev, I know you got another drink. Did you get something different, or still sticking with the same beer?
I went with Corona Extra. I am now officially out of my Sam seasonal pack. I am working through the Coronas I got before the 4th of July. I have quite a few left, so I'll be drinking this for quite a bit.
Nice. Mike, I assume you're still drinking the orange smash.
Yeah.
Nice.
If I didn't, I'll be asleep.
So I was like, do I want to make another martini? Because I finished that one. It was pretty good. Like, do I want to make another one or want to switch it up? So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I was going to do something with this spiced rum. That Kevin was drinking the other night at my wife's birthday party.
Tastes like
But then Mike's wife, Adrian, pointed out that it is cloudy and a little bit suspect. So I decided ultimately just to go back and make another martini. So
it's a little murky.
How were you? How were you the next day, Kev?
I was fine, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did it still
I
taste
didn't.
like
I
Christmas?
did not. I did not drink the entire thing. I probably of that large cup that I had, I drank about a third of it.
Did
But
it still
tastes
feel like you were tasting Christmas?
I would like to try a non-murky version of the secret spiced rum and cherry Coke and see if it still tastes like Christmas.
All right. So moving on, we are discussing tonight what constitutes a movie franchise in part one of what we are affectionately calling the Films and Fermentation Master Debater Series.
Let's get it on.
So our discussion, I put together a little outline for this. We don't have to follow this word for word. It's just kind of like a basis for how to discuss this topic. Starting with what defines a movie franchise, what are some of the elements of a successful franchise, what are some examples of a successful movie franchise, and finally, what are some of the challenges and pitfalls of trying to maintain the quality in a franchise. That is something I think we could talk a lot about given the state of affairs with a lot of different franchises right now. So defining a movie franchise, I looked this up earlier, and the definition I got for this that I accidentally closed out.
A series of films with recurring characters, settings, or story arcs, continuity and plot, and thematic elements.
So I was going to say, according to Google AI, a film series or movie series referred to as a franchise that is a collection of related films in succession that share the same fictional universe or are marketed as a series. So yeah, I put down there that it's a film with recurring characters, setting, story arcs, continuity, plot, thematic elements. I don't know how well continuity plays into it sometimes when you look at some of these franchises that we're probably going to be discussing. But
Yeah.
so what are different types of franchises? I have down here, but I'm sure there's more than just these: direct sequels, spin-offs, reboots, and remakes.
Yeah. Well, you get direct sequels. To me, I would think a movie franchise would be like 3 or more. I don't think 2 would actually constitute as a franchise.
I was going to say, like, how many films do you need before it is considered a franchise? Like, 3 films to me is a trilogy, but does that necessarily make it a franchise?
No.
Like, The Godfather has 3 films, but I wouldn't call it a franchise. I would just call it a
Okay.
trilogy.
I see what
Lord
you're
of the
saying.
Rings, on the other hand, I think I could call it a franchise because now you also have the Hobbit films, as well as the Rings of Power series on Amazon Prime. So now
Right.
you're in franchise territory.
So you're saying like this MCU, the cinematic universe as a whole, is a franchise, but not like the Iron Man doesn't have his own franchise because he's only 3 films.
Well, I think because you would define it as the MCU franchise anyway, right?
Right.
I mean, that's where the debate kind of comes into play here. Like,
Right.
how do we?
How are we gonna do? Yeah.
Like, is Iron Man a franchise or just a series of films within a franchise?
That's my question.
And that's me playing devil's advocate. What do you have to say about it?
I would say that it's a franchise, which in an umbrella universe. I mean, because in the whole universe, I wouldn't consider like the Eternals to be part of a franchise. It's part of the universe.
I think you can argue that it's the Iron Man is a franchise because, like the other films in the MCU, they all start with Marvel Studios presents.
Right.
So it's not like the Fantastic Four films, which are what was it, Fox or Sony, whatever they are,
Mhm.
Right.
or like the Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, which were Sony, or like the original X-Men films. Now you're talking about like
Well, the original X-Men
you
films,
know,
they had enough that
I think
they
you'd
had
call
3
them a
or 4.
franchise.
Yeah.
They had like 4. They had like 4 movies, didn't they?
No, they
Really?
had more than that. They had 6, 7.
Like if you count all the new ones
If you do the Bryan Singer 3, right?
mhm, and then you
Then
count the
you
ones with
had
McAvoy and Fassbender.
right.
Well, would
Um,
you count like the Wolverines to be part of the original X-Men series?
But
Because it's the character
yes,
from that movie. So that means the original
yeah,
X-Men with Wolverine would be a franchise.
yeah.
Because
I mean,
Wolverine itself is almost a franchise because
Right.
it's like 6 films. Like,
and when you consider they brought in the characters from the X-Men movie, Jean
mhm.
Grey appears
Right.
in the Wolverine.
Yep.
Um, um, Captain
You
Picard appears in Logan.
you introduce X-23 and Logan, and
Right.
Mhm.
now he's appearing in the Deadpool film, which is technically. So here's another part where this gets. I don't want this to be all about the MCU, but let's look at this right here. He's now in the new Deadpool movie, which is officially
An MCU movie.
under the umbrella of Disney Plus, which makes it part of the MCU, which
Mhm.
means now his appearance as the Wolverine is in both a Sony franchise and now the Disney franchise.
Right.
Does that make Deadpool now a part of 2 different franchises, and X-23, who's going to have a cameo appearance in Deadpool and Wolverine?
And just for the people who are going to chime in and say, "No, we understand it was actually Fox. It wasn't Sony.
Yeah,
Sony,
Sony.
yeah,
I
but
get the Fox and Sony films confused because they're all kind of the same to me.
yeah,
I mean, the Disney
Well,
Plus MCU ones are easy to parse out.
here's my question. Here's a good question for you then, Lee. If
Mhm.
you're saying only 3 movies make a trilogy, then Indiana Jones wasn't a franchise until the 4th movie.
We don't count the 4th and 5th movie. It's just a trilogy.
So it's not a franchise.
well, no, because
It's
we
a
also
cash cow.
had the unsuccessful Young Indiana Jones Chronicles television show in the mid '90s,
Okay.
which
If
it
we
should
if
be
we count that
included because it had Harrison Ford reprise the role of Old Indy.
that means if we get 2 more Blade Runner films, we're getting ourselves a franchise too. So before we get too off the rails here with this,
Well, that's what the episode was about.
yeah.
All
Well,
of
I'm just gonna say, how do you count reboots and remakes?
You see, Spider-Man kind of screwed that whole thing
Yeah,
up, didn't it?
Exactly right.
No.
Because
No.
we had 2 reboots that just became sequels.
That got put into the franchise
Yeah.
of the MCU.
And now, thanks to the multiverse, are part of the overall umbrella of MCU
Mhm.
films. I think the comic book films kind of have to be on their own with this.
Right.
So let's think of something like RoboCop. The original RoboCop had 3 films, so it's a trilogy.
It's a
Right.
trilogy.
Then you had the remake RoboCop in the early 2000s. Does that remake, reboot, whatever you want to call it, constitute a franchise now? 'Cause now
No,
you have 4 films.
no, because it's its own thing, right? It's separate. Um, I don't think with the exception of RoboCop, the characters weren't even the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it didn't bring back Pencil Dick. It didn't bring back the villains. I don't even think his partner was the same.
He also had a hand.
Yeah. Yeah, instead of just being a face with a spine and a brain.
Well, if you're limited to anything that has more than 4 movies, then you're really cutting a lot of lot out, which we consider franchises. I mean, you would have the Jurassic Park, which is franchises. You got Jurassic World and all that.
Hmm.
John Wick, Fast and Furious.
And do you also include things like books and comic books that expand off of the stories? Video games,
Mm.
you know?
Now you're like really like expanding
I
the
think- I
definition.
think-
That's marketing. That's a franchise. It's, you know?
I feel like everything anymore, depending on the type of film that it is, needs to be a franchise. Like
Mhm.
movie studios are now like, what's the next franchise we can make, not the next film.
Right.
So like Mike mentioned John Wick. Like John Wick's got 4 films, but there's also a series on HBO.
Right.
And there's going to be the spin-off film Ballerina with Ana de Armas. So now you're talking franchise because you have 5 films in a series.
Yep.
Right.
And that's kind of like where it is. Like now, I think studio like France. We probably wouldn't have had this discussion 20 years ago.
No.
Because
20 years
yeah, we were excited
Well,
to get a third film.
Well, most franchises 20 years ago would be a horror film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because everyone's
I
away
agree.
7D.
Because they were easy to make, low budget, and you could
Right.
shoot them out like pretty quickly.
Right. And
Now
Star
you're
Wars.
talking about these big budget, you know.
Well,
And
I guess
an additional question I
Star
have to pose. I'm sorry, Mike. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Mhm.
But like when the movies come out, are they? Is their story set to be a series of movies or a handful of movies, or is it my main story? My story was told, it went really well, and I can expand in a different direction with a different, whatever. But it was not the intent. You know what I'm saying? Like the Matrix movies, when they were made, I think that was just, we have our 3 movies with this filler into the Animatrix, the Animatrix movie in there. But I think that was just like, here it is. This is the story,
I think something like, to use John Wick again as an example, it was a one-time film, but did so well.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It did much better than people expected it to do, and so the studios were like, okay, now we got to get a sequel.
Well, then that's
And-
the development of a franchise,
Yeah.
but it's not the intent of a franchise.
No, but it
Right.
became a franchise. Yeah.
Right.
Whereas something like Star Wars or the MCU or even like anything from J.R.R. Tolkien is kind of like, it's already expected to be a
It's
franchise. I
made
think.
to be a franchise.
Yeah.
Or
Oh, yeah,
it's
because
going
the
to have to
Tolkien-
be a franchise to cover everything.
Even if you went the minimum with the Tolkien books, it's 4 movies.
Mm-hmm.
They went 6, but it was 4 movies. It should have
They
been.
went 7. There were 4 Hobbit films. Wasn't there 4 of them?
No, there were 3 Hobbit films.
Was there only 3?
Only
It
did
was
Three Hobbit
The
films.
Hobbit, The Desolation of Smog,
And the War of the Five
The
Kingdoms.
War of the 5 Kingdoms. Okay, yeah, 3 of them. Yeah, so it was 6
Right.
films total.
6 films
Whereas The
total.
Hobbit was only 1 book, though.
Right.
True.
Like, at minimum, it could have been 4 movies.
All right, so let's stay on the
And the
Lord of
Ring
the
of
Rings. then, 'cause
Power was not. The Ring of Power was not a book, correct?
No, it's
For
just
the
something.
Rings of Power.
it's original. It's not like based on the Silmarillion or the Lost Tales or anything like that.
It's not based on anything by Tolkien.
And now I think it's Netflix maybe is doing a reboot / remake of the Lord of the Rings as a series, or at least that's something I thought I read or heard
Is it
about or
because the
something.
movies are so short they couldn't cover everything?
They need that all important chapter about Tom Bombadil. Yeah, the 18 or 19 hours was not enough. You mean there's 2 more of these?
I gotta sit through 6 more hours of this.
So for anybody out there listening who's wondering what that's about, Mike and I, it was me and me, Mike, right? And our
Yeah.
wives when we went to see it. So it was the 4 of us went to see Fellowship of the Ring, and there were 2 ladies sitting in front of us. And at the end of the film, it's left with a pretty major cliffhanger. And the lady in front of us goes, "Is that how it ends?" And I said, "No, there's like 2 more movies." And she went, "There's 6 more hours of this." I was like, "Yeah, pretty much." Unless you want to watch the DVD releases, then it's 18 hours more. So ultimately, then we're going to say that a franchise, if we had to kind give it a direct definition, it's at least 3 movies that have to branch off into some other form of media.
Okay.
So, like the original Matrix trilogy had the Animatrix and it had a video game.
Okay.
So that was like the start of the franchise. But now you have the Matrix Resurrections or whatever the hell it is. So now it's like a franchise. John
Right.
Wick was a film that was a surprise hit, and that was developed into a franchise now.
And that's where you get dangerous with the franchises. You get a surprise hit, then you try to make it a franchise, and you can bomb.
Well, that's what I think. I think that's the philosophy is nowadays. Like The Conjuring. Conjuring was an amazing film. I thought The Conjuring was one of the best horror films in the last 20 years. Now you have all the Conjuring sequels. You have the Annabelle films. You have the Nun movies. Now you have the final Conjuring film coming out. So you have this whole Conjuring universe. Same thing with Fast and the Furious. You know, you started out with the Fast and the Furious, and now they're on the 10th film now. I think it was that recently came out. And then that's got a branch off film.
And then they have their spin-offs.
The Hobbs and Shaw
Hobbs
spin-off.
and
So
Shaw,
I think, yeah. So I think the definition, it's safe to say, like it has at least 3 films and has branched off into some other form of media. Whereas like The Godfather, I wouldn't call that a franchise. I would just call that a trilogy.
Right.
So
because there, it doesn't really branch off.
You could, well, it does because it has its own video games.
Yeah, I don't want to get too crazy with this now.
With the exception, and going to The Godfather, like the first 2 movies were all based off of the one book, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, it was just the third movie that they kind of
currently rereading because it is a really amazing novel.
The third one is
the original novel that the first 2 films are based on. I'm rereading it right now because it's a really good book.
I started reading that way back, and then got bored, and I left Michael in Italy, and that was a common joke between me and my mom.
It's
where's
really
Michael? He's still in Italy.
Still in Italy. I read it when I was in college, and I've decided to like reread it recently, and it still holds up for me. So, but like the first 2 films are based on the book. The third film was an original screenplay. That was kind of like it wasn't a bad film, but could have been better. Like it needed a few elements to be changed.
Andy Garcia ruined it for you.
He's actually really good in it. Sofia Coppola ruined it for me. It was supposed to be Winona Ryder in the role. And then they wouldn't pay Robert Duvall what he wanted to play Tom Hagen again, so they got George Hamilton, and that was a fucking mistake too. I mean, there were things that could have been fixed that would have made that movie better. All right, so moving on to the next item here we have on our list, key elements of a successful franchise. I have down that a successful franchise should have a strong central narrative, iconic characters, a brand that is recognized, and some sort of cultural impact. So the question I'm going to lead off with is this: does it need to have all of those things to be a successful franchise, or some combination of those things?
And I will just say Star Trek.
Yeah, right.
Star Trek captures all of that. Every part, world building, literally and figuratively, engaged storylines, whether they be character driven or whether they be just plot driven.
I would even say a strong central narrative, because even though there's so many different spin-offs, they all find a way to kind of connect to each other in some way.
Oh, the Prime Directive.
Well, I'm not talking about like in terms of like that's a plot convenience, but I'm more like the lore and the canon and all that stuff.
They still build on their canon.
So then, do you include the J.J. Abrams reboots as part of the franchise, or are they their own thing?
No, I think they follow.
They have to, because number one, they brought Spock in, the original Spock in. It's just what you would consider a alternate reality of the original.
Well,
the brand recognition. I mean, the Starfleet icon is even been stolen and copied for Space Force. Marketing and merchandising. I mean, there are Trek conventions, everywhere. I think there's even a Star Trek cruise.
Unrelated, but I think it's a funny thing. When we were all hanging out the other night, Adrian said that one of the things she didn't like about the Acolyte was that the Jedi's robes look so different from the robes she's used to seeing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I said, "Do you watch Star Trek?" She went, "Yeah." I said, "Are the uniforms all the same?"
No, but I think it's the color palette for
Yeah.
all the same.
It's the High Republic version of the
Right.
Jedi thing. If you look at the novels, like the
Yeah,
drawings in the novels look like that. But
I
yeah,
mean,
we're
I
getting
think
off we're getting off point here.
saying that the different Jedi temples and different planets actually wear different robes at their temples. But anyway, we are getting
Anyway, but like I agree, Kev. Like you said with Star Trek, like there's a strong central narrative. There's definitely world building. You have more than multiple handfuls of iconic characters.
cultural impact. You can take Klingon in
Mhm.
college as a
Yes.
language.
No,
You can read Hamlet in Klingon.
cultural impact. Cultural impact. The communicators from the original series. Cell phone.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no
Oh, yeah.
tablets and
The
cell
tablets,
phones
the
and,
iPads, the tablets.
the
Video calling. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
the attempts at like warp drive. I mean,
Mhm.
that's. I mean, yes, it is currently fictitious, but it is something that people are working at. It
I
is
mean,
the inspiration for our modern technology.
Yeah.
I think like things like black holes and wormholes and stuff have been proven in science because of their origin in science fiction, particularly Star Trek.
And when you think, why can't I think of Horror's name, the original? Nichelle
Yeah, Nichelle Nichols. Yeah,
Nichols having
Yeah.
to want to quit the show and being influenced by Martin Luther King. No, you have to be on it. You are,
exactly.
you are a figurehead for thousands, upon thousands of black people who never thought that they'd see a black person on the bridge and have a commanding role, and
Look at it like I forgot I just lost what I was going to say now about that. But yeah, that is a very famous story about how. Oh, I was going to say like Gene Roddenberry himself, the creator of Star Trek. Like that was his vision, was this future where everybody was equal and everybody was, and money wasn't important anymore. It was all about exploration and expansion and discovery and science and all this stuff. So I mean, like, yeah, that's the impact to me.
right.
And talk about a recognizable brand.
Yeah.
I think most people know what the Enterprise is, even if they've never watched the show.
Yep.
Well, let's put it this way: we named a shuttle after the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go like this to somebody, they pretty much know what this means.
Yeah.
Even if they've never seen Star Trek.
What the hell's an aluminum falcon?
If anybody's not watching YouTube, I'm doing the "Live Long and Prosper" salute.
He's doing a very dirty gesture with his hands.
Yeah.
Got a hole with the one finger.
Talk about cultural impact and brand recognition. One of my favorite Star Trek films of all time, Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
When you can do a really good parody of a film like Star Trek and be respectful to it and still be a good film on your own, like that's cultural impact.
Right.
I think that's probably one of the better examples of it. But then going back to my original question, does it need all these elements?
I would
like
think
a strong
it would
central
need,
narrative.
I would think everything. I think it needs all. I need at least 3 of the 4.
So think of something like James Bond. Aside from the fact that all these films are about a spy named James Bond, it's being played by different actors, different time periods, different villains. So it's not exactly
A
central narrative. It's an overarching story, but he is an iconic character. The villains are iconic. People recognize 007 when you see like certain things from like the films, and it has that a cultural impact.
Yeah, so I think I think you need at least 3 of the 4.
And if you want to talk about like branching out into other media, GoldenEye was one of the best video games ever made.
Yeah.
And there was an animated series in the 90s called James Bond Jr.
There was actually a role-playing game.
Really?
Yes.
Like a video game, role playing game, or like Dungeons and Dragons.
No,
James
like a
Bond.
Dungeons and Dragons role playing game.
It was
Pen,
called
full of paper.
Spies and
Murder
Fortress.
Mystery Dinner.
That was just James Bond 007.
Double O Dead.
So let's talk about examples of successful franchises in terms of these key elements. So we already mentioned James Bond. We already mentioned Star Wars and Star Trek a lot. We mentioned Lord of the Rings. Here's one I'm going to throw out now. Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now because you have the 3 movies past it for the Fantastical Beasts.
Fantastic Beasts.
You have the
you have
books that
an
it's originally
entire
based on.
you have an entire amusement park that's based off of it.
You have the whole library of books that it's based on. You have the play now too, The Cursed Child.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And
You
then there's
have
also talks
merchandising.
And we're also talking about, I think we're also talking about another reboot as well for like the Harry Potter franchise.
Jesus.
Like you can, because you can't just be, it can't be well enough as is. You have to every 20 years redo it.
Mm.
So longevity and impact. James Bond has ebbed and flowed over the years. I think, you know, it was like
who you get to play James Bond.
Yeah, like Sean Connery and Roger Moore did really well in their runs, but then when you got to Timothy Dalton, they kind of fell off a little bit. Not his fault. I just think most people were expecting Pierce Brosnan, but he couldn't do it at the time.
And then Pierce Brosnan did pick it up, and that's when it,
kind of lifts a little bit.
Daniel Craig took over, and that
it really blew up. I like
it. Did blow up, and it was such a different kind of James Bond, than what we were used to.
From what I understand, it was closer to what Ian Fleming's version of James Bond was from the novels, was the Daniel Craig James Bond.
Yes.
No love for George Lazenby and Her Majesty.
No.
One and done James Bond.
No.
I like the theory that James Bond is just a cover name and that these are all like different people using the same name.
Mm-hmm.
Which would help if the next James Bond ends up being like Idris Elba.
Well, the only problem with that is the Her Majesty's Secret Service, because he was upset about his wife being killed in the movie before.
The last film with Daniel Craig, spoiler alert, he blows up. So, how do you explain that in the next film?
He'll come back.
Well, that's where
There'll be a woman. There'll be a woman. It'll be Jamie Bond.
Well, that's where the whole like theory that it's different people using the same name it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Anybody a fan of the Fast and the Furious franchise?
No.
I think I've seen 2 of the movies, the first 2, and then I kind of died off.
I saw the first, and that's about where I quit.
I didn't see that many of them, so.
Mike, I just said I saw the first one. Mike says I haven't seen that many of them.
Yeah.
So I'm looking up top movie franchises to see some things we may have missed. So we got the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Star Wars. Somebody had down here that the Disney live action reimaginings are now a franchise because they're these like live action, versions of these films.
I know we've covered like, the stories that take place in the same universe, like Tarzan and The Little Mermaid and Frozen, but but there's no crossover. They don't intersect in the movies. And I think it's the same with the live action. You can't, they're just produced by the same company with lots of fun Easter eggs, but that's about as far as I'd go with it.
That's the only thing that's the only thread that holds them together is that they're made by Disney.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Same thing, like I wouldn't say Pixar is a franchise because, unless you're talking about an individual film. So like the Toy Story films are kind of a franchise at this point, but
right.
Like Up is just a Pixar film. It's not the Pixar franchise.
No,
right.
I wouldn't call them franchises.
So we have here we have Harry Potter. We talked about. We didn't talk about the DCEU
because we were talking about
because that's a mess.
We were talking about success.
It can't be a franchise if it just as unsuccessful as it is.
We're talking about a loose central narrative. Misused iconic characters.
Mhm.
Let's see what else we got here. We have the original X-Men series, Jurassic Park, Fast and the Furious franchise. They're calling it here the Middle Earth franchise because that would include The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all those films.
All right.
The Hunger Games.
They were.
I think it's bordering on franchise territory now because you
Now
have
with the prequel.
you have the
Right.
prequel and plus the last
Mhm.
book was split into 2 films, so now you have 5
Yeah,
films
but
total.
that's a money grab. That's not making
Yeah, I
it
know.
a
They
franchise.
did it with
That's a
Harry
money grab.
Potter as well.
Yeah, and that's a money grab.
So.
But Harry Potter
Uh,
could be a franchise without the split.
yeah.
Yeah.
We had enough movies. Enough.
Shrek.
Yeah.
I think Shrek's
Yeah.
got to be a franchise. There's 5 Shrek films, plus there's 3
Puss
or
in
4
Boots.
Puss in Boots spinoffs. There's TV specials, video games,
Mhm.
and all that stuff.
Holiday specials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael Bay's Transformers.
Do we have to discuss that? Isn't that on the
Oh wait, I'm sorry. They have the total number of movies on this list I'm looking at. So the MCU right now has 40 films.
right?
Star Wars has 24 releases if you count the series as well.
Okay.
Live action for Disney is 17 films at the current. Harry Potter, it's 35 pieces of media total. So then I'm just going down the list here and I'm looking at a few things. So you got Jurassic Park / Jurassic World. There's 11 releases at this point.
Right.
Despicable Me has 7 releases, so it's now franchise territory because you got all the Minions films as well. Avatar is currently sitting at 2 films, but is scheduled to have, I think, 5 total.
Right.
If that ever happens.
And it has its own world, part of a park.
Yeah. Pirates of the Caribbean, 5 films currently.
5 films,
yeah.
Star Trek, obviously. Twilight, 7 films. Mission Impossible is currently sitting at 8 films.
There were 7 Twilight films?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last book, again, was split in 2.
Yep.
Yeah, but there weren't there only 3 books?
No.
There were 6, I believe, yeah. Mission Impossible currently sitting at
Yeah,
I
I can see
8
that.
films, 9 films, something like that. The Dark Knight trilogy, yeah, but that's a trilogy again. I don't know because it doesn't tie into any of the other films. Indiana Jones, they have down here.
We have 5 films now.
Yeah.
And the TV series.
Planet of the Apes. If you count the original films and the reboots, it's 10 movies.
Mhm.
Well, the original series had 4 movies anyway, I
4
believe.
movies, and then
Yeah.
there was the Tim Burton reboot, so that's a 5. And now there are 4 more Matt Reeves.
So
I
it's
think
2
there
separate.
may have been a TV series too at one point in like the 70s.
So I would call that 2 franchises.
Yeah, separate if you want to look at them separately.
I would.
You have Rocky franchise because you have the Rocky films, the Creed films, and the Rocky Balboa film. So
Yeah.
you could also throw Rambo on there too, I guess.
Wasn't Rocky a cartoon on Saturday? No, that was Rambo. Rambo was a
Rambo
Saturday
cartoon.
morning cartoon.
So did
That's what you
RoboCop.
want your kids watching.
RoboCop had one too. Ghostbusters has 4 films now plus the animated series, and 5 films if you count the 2016 female reboot. I'm looking at it's funny. Like there's so many films that have like so many sequels that they technically are franchises if we look at it by the definition we used earlier. So you have like the Halloween films.
Right. Almost every horror film is a franchise.
You have the Alien films now when you count Prometheus and Romulus and those other films.
Covenant.
Here's a franchise I definitely didn't think about. Medea. There are currently 12 Medea movies. Jesus Christ.
What about Ernest?
Yeah. This would definitely be a
I
franchise.
guess
in
that,
me. It's like
means that Beverly Hills Cop is a franchise now.
Beverly Hills Cop, then Die Hard, the
Yeah.
Jack Ryan franchise with Clear and Present
Jack
Danger.
Ryan
and Hunt for Red
franchise
October and all that.
is probably a legit franchise.
Well, you got the series with John Krasinski now and all that too. So
Yeah.
So now we're
Good
getting like
show.
really. Now it's getting like really like it's kind of pushing it now with some of the movies I'm seeing here. So,
Okay.
here's one. Here's one. The Muppets.
Oh yeah.
There's
Heck is what
definitely a
I'm saying.
franchise. They're the original franchise. I think that's legit to say that they are. Is they started with the show,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's Sesame Street,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was all the movies from the 70s through the 80s.
Don't forget
They had-
Fraggle Rock,
They had Fraggle Rock. There were a couple other like series here and there throughout
Muppet Babies.
throughout the night. The Muppet Babies, that animated film, and then you had all the stuff that they did when they signed over with Disney. So definitely. All right, challenges and pitfalls. It's our last topic here. Maintaining quality. The risk of declining quality over multiple films. I think that's obvious.
That's quite obvious.
Yeah.
I think it's obvious with most franchises.
I mean, even so, let's take the MCU for example, because they're the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
They have their flops.
Oh yeah, a lot of them recent. I think that's one of the reasons they decided to get the Russo brothers back.
Yeah.
Same thing with the DCEU hiring James Gunn now to try to reboot their series.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars.
I think they need to take a break.
Yeah,
and come back.
I think the same thing with. I feel the same way with Star Wars. I feel that's what I have here of audience fatigue, oversaturation of the market. Like there's one thing to create a franchise, and then there's another to just totally inundate you with shit, and to the point that you're like drowning in it. To the point that like Disney Plus had to show you that the MCU is now split into movies, animation, and TV, so you don't have to feel the need to watch it all.
Right. Well, that's because you feel like you had to watch, every television series just to find out what's going to happen in the next movie.
By the way, did anybody get kind of excited about the new Captain America film when you saw the Red Hulk at the end of the trailer?
Yes.
Well, that's because Hulk World's coming.
It's the Red Hulk, and it's Harrison Ford because William Hurt passed away.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And is that a movie or is that a series?
It's a movie, Captain America in the New World or something like that. It's called.
Yeah, New World Order.
It was supposed to be a series, and then I think they decided to just make it a film. Because I don't think the Falcon and Winter Soldier did as well as they hoped it would.
I thought it was a good series.
I think Falcon and Winter Soldier did well. I think Secret Wars didn't do as well as they thought it would. And
I feel like
they put too much out too fast.
I think one of their best series was the WandaVision series.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in total though, it's and Loki I thought was a good series.
And now we have Agatha coming out.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's an oversaturation.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you keep things fresh? I say, like you said, Mike, you got to take a break.
Yep.
I think what MCU needs to do is there's certain characters you need to introduce as a television series, and certain characters you need to introduce in the movies. Like the Eternals should have been introduced as a television series, not a movie.
Yeah.
Too many characters.
Wasn't that TV? Oh no, that was the Immortals. I bet.
Yeah, it was too long a film. It was there was too much to cover.
Too many characters to learn right in a 2-hour film.
Yeah. Now I think I'm looking up a stat I saw here earlier about the superhero films. Iron Man came out in
2008.
2008. Hold on. 5. I think.
8.
8.
8.
8.
8.
7.
Because I'm trying to think. There was a statistic I saw.
9.
Something about how there was like at least one superhero movie film every year. Yeah, 2008. It was at least one superhero movie film every year for like a 10-year stretch or something.
Right.
Starting with Iron Man.
Mm-hmm.
and it worked for a while because it was all building up to the Infinity War and
And
Endgame,
they had a plan.
but they didn't know what they were doing after that.
No.
I read that they've recasted Kang, so I guess they're still trying to do that whole storyline.
Mm.
But yeah, oversaturation. You need to take a break, like you said, Mike, and like give people a chance to breathe and get caught up.
If you put it in the cycle of like, we're going to focus on one particular group, one a year on like a 3-year rotation or a 4-year rotation, it gives you just enough time to breathe to be like, oh yeah, no, you know what, I need that, or even just one a year.
Mhm.
Right.
Gives you time to appreciate what has come out. It gives you time to develop a better story.
That's why it worked with the Avengers, because you started with Iron Man, then you had Captain America, you had Thor, you had Iron Man 2,
Mm-hmm.
and so like you had enough time to kind of get to know these characters before bringing them all together.
Yep.
Right.
Plus, you had Black Widow and all that like introduced within the other films, and so that it worked that way. And then, but now it's like there's so many characters being thrown at you, and if you're not somebody who's like adept at
Me?
the comic book stuff like we are, you're like, who's this
Now,
guy?
here's an example of not letting us breathe.
Mm-hmm. Star
Suicide
Wars.
Squad.
See, now the first Suicide Squad film was terrible.
It was.
The one that James Gunn directed was really, really good.
Yeah, but I still think they were too close together.
Well, yeah, it was kind of like, let's reboot this now because it sucks so badly.
Yeah.
And if they had done right by it the first time around, they wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
done a reboot.
Even that was like a mishmash.
You
pulled some characters, some actors from the original movie.
Mm-hmm.
Pulled some new actors.
Wait long enough to forget how bad the other one sucked.
Yeah.
And then they had that awesome TV show Peacemaker that came out.
I like Peacemaker. Peacemaker's fun. Second season's coming out soon.
Nice.
I'm wondering how that's going to tie into the James Gunn stuff, because it's so muddled now because there's so many different things. But yeah, I think we did a good job kind of debating what makes a franchise, and I think overall it's kind of like you have at least 3 movies, but you branch out into these other type of media, and you're successful. You have iconic characters. People are drawn to these films over and over again, and that's why they keep making them. So,
right.
So, before we just wrap it all up, of all the ones that we've kind of covered, who do you think has done franchising the best?
God damn.
Star Trek.
The Muppets.
Star Trek.
Yeah, I think I love the Muppets, but I think seriously, I think Star Trek. Yeah,
they learned back in the 90s about oversaturation with their television series. That's why it took so long to get some of the other movies out.
I think they also like kind of learned from their mistakes too. So like the series didn't last very long. It was only 3 seasons, something like that. And then, it got picked up in syndication. That's where it got popular again. So then they said, okay, Star Wars is popular. Let's make a movie. But then they tried to make a movie that was more 2001: A Space Odyssey and less Star Trek.
Right.
And so when they decided to do The Wrath of Khan, they went back to the formula that worked.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were successful for then. And then they Next Gen brought it back, to like a new audience.
Right.
Then you had was Deep Space Nine, Voyager,
yeah,
Enterprise.
Deep Space Nine started about halfway through Next Gen.
Next Gen, yeah.
Then when Next Gen ended, they started Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
But you still had DS9 going on until halfway through that was done.
But they all tried something different too, because it was like,
right.
Next Gen was a spin-off of the original series, whereas Deep Space Nine was, well, what happens when all these characters are in one stationary, place?
Which is funny because that was the first time, they've had other series about space stations and they never worked.
Mm-hmm.
They actually got it to work.
Yeah. and then Voyager was like, well, what happens if we put them in an unfamiliar situation?
Yeah.
And then I think that saturation started with Enterprise, which I thought was a good series, but it was too much at that point, and we didn't really need the backstory, I think.
Right.
But then, like you
I-
said, they took time off.
I liked Enterprise, but I agree it was a lot, kind of one after the other, after the other, after the other. I wish they would have done Enterprise, but with a little bit of time in between, with a better idea. But I mean, the new shows that have come out, I have only really caught Picard. I have not caught, Below Decks. I haven't caught Discovery. I haven't caught
Just-
Brave New World.
Brave New
Brave New
World.
World.
Yeah, Brave New World. I said Brave
Okay.
New World. I've watched the first season, and I loved it. It took you back almost to like Next Gen.
Okay.
Okay.
It's got
Yeah,
that,
I wanna-
it's
I
almost
wanna
got
check
that
it out.
feel. I mean, season 2's already done and out on DVD. I have to watch.
So I kind of agree with Mike. I think Star Trek is one of the most successful franchises, and
Mhm.
kind of knows their audience, and follows what the audience wants.
Yeah.
Star Wars could have been that. I think if they had just picked up with the Timothy Zahn novels from the '90s and used those as your 7, 8, and 9 instead of trying to come up with something brand new.
Right.
Or if they would have stayed with the same director through three movies.
Yeah, or like be consistent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or if you're not going to stay with the same director, because they didn't do it with the original trilogy, because George Lucas directed the first one and the third one, but Irving Kershner did the second one.
Yeah,
Right.
but it was
So
still
Lucas
his.
still wrote the screenplay for it.
Yeah.
At least have the same screenwriter for all
Yeah,
three
'cause-
films,
The second, what would say second? The eighth movie made no sense,
Mm,
and the ninth
Well-
movie was just trying to clean up the eighth movie.
yeah, exactly. And that was the problem. Mike, you have any beer trivia history for us this week?
I do. I got some. I got a fun fact for you. The annual Great Japan Beer Festival, known as Beer Fest, and while Japan, a beer-loving country, has many other festivals in various locations, this one is the biggest of them all, held in Tokyo, and usually it occurs in early June. There you go.
All right. So we have a new segment this week, the cinema quote of the week, brought to us by Mike and read to us by Kevin. What's our quote of the week?
Cinema quote. Cinema quote. Let me read this quote. Sorry.
No.
The length of a film should be directly related to the endurance of the human bladder, as said by Alfred Hitchcock.
I agree.
Just a little disclaimer: all these quotes do come from a little book about movies, quotes for the cinephile in your life.
Nice. That's also our book of the week, too. All righty. So, thank you everybody for joining us tonight for episode 158, the first part in our Films and Fermentation Master Debater series, where tonight we debated what makes a movie part of a franchise. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it for you. Remember, you can find us at filmsandfermentation@gmail.com or go to linktree.com/films and fermentation to find all our social media and podcast links. We are now on Reddit as well. You can go to teespring.com to buy our merchandise. You can go to Patreon to support us. And you can check out the Deluxe Edition Network at deluxeeditionnetwork.com. Check out our podcast and all the other podcasts on The Den, including the Real Drunks podcast, which is podcast of the month of July. And again, shout out to our friends at the No Subs, No Dubs podcast. Join us next time around at the crossroads between Pickled and Fermented for episode 159. I don't have a title for this episode yet, but basically the gist of it is we're going to be looking at a article from Collider.com that lists the 10 movies from the 1980s that are considered perfect from beginning to end. And we're going to have another little discussion on whether or not we agree with the movies on that list, or if there's any we feel are missing or whatnot. So we're going to be looking at 1980s films that are perfect from beginning to end. Once again, I'm Leo.
I'm Kevin.
I might.
Remember, when the rum is cloudy, it's suspect.
Hey, what's
You
your
can
drink
listen-
tonight, guys?
Oh, yeah. My drink was so good. I had a couple of them, and I probably shouldn't have had as many as I did. But it's par for the course with this show, I think. So,
Exactly.
Kevin, how was your water in a can?
I didn't drink that. You know, I didn't drink it. If it's caffeinated, if it's an energy drink, I'm going to hold off till I need it.
Just water.
Yeah, I think it's just water.
Yeah.
You can drink it when you're thirsty. Again, this has been the Films and Fermentation podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.